Hi, I'm Stacy. Welcome to the kitchen of my old Kentucky home. Today on Bourbon and Biscuits, we're going to get romantic. We're going to be showing you 2 recipes that are perfect to help you celebrate Valentine's. Let's get started. Let's have some oysters on the half shell with a Bourbon Mignonette. Here's what we'll need. Some fresh oysters, a 1/4 cup of white balsamic vinegar, 2 tablespoons of a Kentucky bourbon, a small shallot, scallion, salt, and pepper. Okay, the classic mignonette is such a simple recipe. The real twist on it for Kentucky style is the bourbon, of course, and all we're gonna do is chop up some ingredients and mix it all together. So the first thing we're gonna do is take a shallot. I've got 2 to show you. You want 1 small shallot, and this is kind of the difference between what I think is a small and a medium shallot. If we had a medium, we would maybe use like a 1/3 of that. So what we're gonna do is mince this, and basically mincing this and the scallion, or in some parts, green onion. So a lot of people associate oysters with a festive occasion, a romantic occasion, the holidays, or Valentine's Day. And one would not think that a landlocked state like Kentucky and the city of Louisville would be necessarily have a long history with oysters, but that is simply not the case. The research that we've been able to do, because we found this oysters used in a lot of Kentucky cookbooks from like colonial days on, and they would be used in soups and sauces, ketchups, oyster ketchup, omelets, and of course fried and in stews. And they said the settlers got them from any means imaginable, but they were very special. So that's sort of why they were considered on the dinner table at holidays, festive occasions, because they were so special. They would come in on a stagecoach, and of course then, manufactured ice wasn't a thing when that started. But when they were able to do ice, and then the stagecoach turned into the railroad, they became a little more available, but still very expensive. So they've just been long associated with special occasions. All right, we're just gonna mince this really fine and add this to our little serving bowl. Oh, it's starting to get me a little bit, that onion aroma in my eyes. And then we're just gonna take, we need a 1/2 tablespoon of the scallion. So I've got 2, I'm kind of eyeballing it. Of course, you can always have more. I'm gonna use both the white and the green. And again, we're just gonna mince this. I like to throw in some of that green too for a little more color. And then I've got 2 ounces of Kentucky bourbon. Doesn't matter which brand you use. Maybe not something too expensive. I'm gonna get out the pappy for this. But any Kentucky bourbon will do. Just make sure it's Kentucky. Whoops, throwing them around. All right, now we're just gonna pour in our balsamic. This is, a lot of balsamics that you're used to are the darker color. This is white balsamic that you wanna use for this. So we've got a 1/4 cup. And you can certainly double this recipe. Got our bourbon. And then we're just gonna add a pinch of salt, or to your own taste. And I prefer a crushed ground pepper, so I'm gonna add that into this. And there you have it. It's just your simple bourbon mignonette. Now, nothing goes better with oysters than champagne, right? So while I shuck us some oysters, we're gonna go to Jessica for a special bourbon champagne cocktail.
All right, so today I'm going to be making a Kentucky Royale. We're going to be using champagne, Chambord, which is a black raspberry liqueur, Kentucky bourbon, of course, and we've got some blackberries here for a garnish. So I'm just going to do this right in our flute glass. I'm going to do 1 ounce of the Chambord and 1 ounce of bourbon. Got our 4 roses here because I thought that was appropriate for Valentine's Day. And then we're just gonna top this off with cold champagne. So this is a twist on a classic cocktail, a Cur Royale, which is creme de cassis, which is a black currant liqueur. So we modified it a little, added bourbon. I think it's gonna be even better this way. All right, last thing, I'm just gonna garnish with a couple of blackberries. And simple as that, we've got our Kentucky Royale.
So you know how I guess, study all these, sorry, I'm nerdy, old Kentucky cookbooks for research on the show and all that. Well, this is a more modern one, actually, but I love it. I love the stories she's curated on the culinary history of Kentucky. It's, I'm sure it's on Amazon. Fiona Young Brown, you should look it up. And I found this quote about oysters, so I thought I'd have to share it.
Okay, all right.
Story time, right? Okay. So Thomas D. Clark, who was a famous Kentucky historian about a lot of his books on just general things, he once wrote this. There can be little doubt, but the Kentuckians know how to dine. Their historical definition of a good dinner is a turkey at one end of the table, a ham at the other, 6 vegetables down one side, and 7 down the other with pickles and jelly sprinkled in between, and with a side dish of oysters.
Well, I don't know how I feel about the pickles and jelly sprinkled in between, but I'm definitely on board with the oysters.
Aren't these fun too?
Yeah, absolutely.
And who knew that it would, would you have thought that landlocked Kentucky would be such a predominant place to have oysters as a treat?
Well, and I didn't know the history at all, but I do know, since we're home to UPS Worldport, that Louisville actually does get an incredible amount of fresh seafood. So that all kind of makes sense, and I didn't realize
That's a great
as
point.
being a centrally located place, historical and modern.
Absolutely. If you
Makes
go
a
back
difference.
and look at pictures of the early 1900s, even before the airport cargo and all that, they're coming in from the railroad, and they would be stacked up in windows of shops downtown, and they would either be really cheap, like 5 cents, or free, because the story goes our German immigrants that came were trying to push beer, and the more oysters they sold, and the salty and the crackers that went in, made them buy more beer.
Oh,
So
that's
it's got a
great.
long history with the oysters. Of course, the fried oysters that they
Rolled
still serve at
oysters,
Chet's
all
and all
kinds
that
of
places.
things. Yeah. And they are great kind of an appetizer with our aperitif cocktail for a romantic dinner, or really kind of anytime, but kind of a special occasion, fun, romantic.
Absolutely.
It's great. So.
And I love this drink. I love the name.
Yeah.
Joking off camera though that it's we would not say the Kentucky Royale. We call it
the Kentucky Royal.
we were in for sales.
But we're keeping it classy today on Bourbon and Biscuits. So Kentucky Royale it is.
So here's to keeping it classy.
All right, cheers. We'll see you next time on Bourbon
And Biscuits. Cheers. Cheers.